Hello everybody. There's been a lot of talk lately about the continuation of the Cold War, and I don't believe that'll ever occur again. Of course, it could. But anyway, there's been a lot of talk about it, and I lived part of the Cold War. I was in the military between the years of 1956 to 1966. And when I traveled overseas when I was in the military, I always traveled by commercial concerns or commercial carriers. I was leaving Istanbul, Turkey, and I had a flight on a Pan American 707 to New York City from Istanbul. The itinerary of that flight was Istanbul, Belgrade, Yugoslavia, London, England, and on into New York City. So we landed in Belgrade, and we had to disembark the airplane for some reason. I don't know if they were taking on some extra supplies for the trip across the Atlantic. But this was in 1966, in what a lot of people would have considered the height of the Cold War. And I can remember how, I don't want to say strange, but how unusual it felt being in that part of the world during that era. There was a feel, or let me put it this way, there was a feeling that you had because things were as they were. But anyway, I was thinking about that this morning when I got up, and I thought I'd share that with you. We were only there about 45 minutes, and then we boarded the Pan American jet and flew to London, England, and from London to New York City. So, if you went to Belgrade, Yugoslavia, or any of those countries today, it would be no different probably than traveling to Chicago from the mountains of North Carolina and Tennessee, or even to Atlanta. But I'm glad that I got to take that journey, even though the only part of the country I saw from the window of a Pan American 707. And two, when we came into the airspace of Belgrade, I saw two, I guess they were MiGs, flying air defense missions, and they were probably using the Pan American flight for practice. But it was exciting, and surprisingly, I guess it's because when you're young, you feel that way, but I had absolutely no fear. And I loved to fly, and I was excited seeing what I guess were MiG aircraft of the 1966 era flying fairly close to the Boeing 707 Pan American jet. And one other little story concerning that jet. I forget, maybe it was London, England. There was a seat beside of me that was empty. And this man came aboard, and I gave him the window seat. And he looked like he was a white knuckles flyer. He really had fear on his face. And we were sitting right behind the wing until you could see the jet engines from our vantage point. And we took off. I hadn't had a chance to have a conversation with him before we took off. And he kept looking at those jets and had a worried look on his face. And I said, this is not your first flight, is it? And he said, no, it isn't. He said, I fly often. But he said, I don't like to fly. And I said, well, I enjoy it. He said, I really don't like to fly. So we talked a little longer. So he asked me what I was doing in that part of the world. I told him that I was in the military. And I said, by the way, what do you do? He said, I'm a jet mechanic on those engines on this airplane. He said, that's why I'm scared to death. And I said, well, thanks a lot. Now you've got me worried. If the guy that works on them is concerned, then you've hit a button with me. He was a real nice guy. I don't know whether he was pulling my leg or what. But anyway, we continued on to New York City with no hitches. That's just a story about the 60s, and I entitled it The Cold War because in the 60s, that's what we were really involved in. Well, thank you very much. We'll see you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.